Welcome back. Let's take a look at how your markets are faring. Asian shares, remember they start early in the morning our time and have already closed. They fell, tracking another retreat on Wall Street. Market players also shifted their focus to the release of key US jobs data later today. Concerns continue to brew around the US-China trade talks being held in Beijing, with little optimism about a positive outcome. The Japanese remained on a public holiday today as trade talks created those jitters. Hong Kong shares were shaky. The Hang Seng Index closed down more than 1%. Chinese stocks declined, but to a lesser degree, the Shanghai Composite falling down by 1/3%. US stocks ended lower last night after a choppy session. While some analysts characterized earnings results as fantastic, it seems investors were not blown away by the performances. Even positive economic data out of the United States was not enough to buoy the markets there, as strong economic data offset disappointing earnings reports from several companies. The Dow Jones Industrial rose by a hair, a fraction of a percent. The S&P 500 down 1/5%. The Nasdaq Composite Index also down about that much. All right, let's bring it home. So we've been struggling with the rand this week. What's happening right now, Nampu?
Thanks very much, Francis. Well, we see that the all-share index is currently in positive territory. It opened positively and has breached 1% in terms of the amount it's risen by. We see that financials and industrials are leading the charge there. Mining counters not doing so well. And of course, Sibanye-Stillwater really getting hit hard. The last I checked, it was down nearly 5%. It could well have worsened. And of course, this is on the back of that terrible news that 4 miners have perished underground following a seismic activity yesterday, and of course 3 miners remain outstanding. They still need to be rescued, and it's not known whether they're okay or not. So they have been badly affected, and of course it does beg the question about the sustainability of mining in places where seismic activity is a regular thing. You know, is it really worth it, you know, to lose one life, let alone 4 lives or more, if, you know, to make money? You know, that's a big question that I suppose needs to be spoken about. And of course, in terms of the local currency, which you asked about, we see that having lost a little bit of ground, and that's despite the US dollar actually losing ground relative to its currency peers. But we're going to get some analysis in just a moment. Let's take a look at the indicators. I'm joined by Warwick Lucas. He's from Galileo Capital. Thanks for joining us, sir, as always.
My pleasure.
Good stuff. Markets have much to contend with today. Of course, on the one hand, there are those US-China trade negotiations, which are very critical, of course, and the April US jobs number, people really looking to see what's happening with the wages there.
All right, so generally developments in the Far East are a reasonable mixed bag. I mean, we are seeing some furthering in the Korean situation there, which is long overdue. But another matter that has been long unattended to was the issue of US-China trade relations. So I think in sitting down over the past 2 days, they've actually found out just how far apart they really are. And so a lot of corrective active action required. But at least a long simmering problem being dealt with there. As far as the job numbers go, I would say, well, usual caveat that applies is just please to remember that those are very noisy data, and markets sometimes react to it more than it's actually warranted.
Well, they're noisy data, as you say, but in February, we got a jobs number, and we learned that inflation, or at least wage inflation, had risen by, 2.7% or something at that time. And then the markets went into a tiz and markets went into about a 10% correction. So
yeah, no, it certainly is one to watch. The key number really is actually what are those unemployment numbers doing, because that's an actual hard number as opposed to an estimate like jobs numbers.
All right, okay. And then, of course, the local market is in positive territory. How much of that is being driven by the weaker rand, and why is the rand weaker today, given the fact that the US dollar has been weakening relative to other currencies?
Okay, so we have a general reversion effect across weeks. Namely, if you've had a weak market, you tend to find that a Friday is strong, and it's particularly strong in our case. We saw the US actually was at its lowest point on Thursday, around about the time we closed, and then recovered. So we actually got a recovery off that base as well, coming through there. So it's basically just a rebound effect. As far as the rand goes, well, I guess it's pretty much a case that other currencies tend to do the opposite of whatever the dollar's doing. It always seems to be a bit of an either-or. So I guess that's what's filtering through on the rand there.
All right. And of course, in my introduction, I spent quite a bit of time on this whole mining issue. Sibanye, Stillwater, losing about 5% on its share. Could be more as the session has progressed. So, that question that I posed, do you think that perhaps, given what's happened, that there's going to be more regulation? Because we know that the mining minister is going there, for example, when there's an incident, the authorities come and they close down the mine until they're satisfied that it's safe again. But if you're in a location where seismic activity is a regular thing, isn't there a broader question to be had about, the viability of mining if people's lives are always constantly going to be at risk, no matter what safety, implementations you put in place? Okay,
so as the mining industry has evolved, they've gone to depths and levels that are absolutely unbelievable compared to what they were 30 years ago. And the technical challenges are much, much larger than they were in those days. And yet, the astonishing thing is, if we look back on say 30 years and prorated it statistically, the fatality rate is probably anything between 1/5 and 1/10 of what it was in those days. So there have been significant improvements, but nevertheless, deep level mining remains extremely dangerous. And the fact of the matter is, the deeper we go and the more the mines get mined out, they do eventually, as you say, become unsustainable.
Do you think that Sibanye might develop a mindset where it decides to get rid of its gold assets and maybe just keep the platinum? Because, it's been on a massive acquisition drive, and it does have a lot of assets, and it has to balance a lot of things.
Well, I think it always was a portfolio diversifiers in terms of their getting into platinum in the first place. Right. So I don't see that happening, no.
And then we saw a result come out today. Dischem, they've not long been listed on the bourse. They came out with annual results for the year ended February. Headline earnings per share up 6.1% and group turnover up 13%. Now, on the face of it, those numbers look okay. But what's your analysis when you compare them to their main competitor, which is Clicks?
All right, so when I look at those numbers, one of the things that stands out is the actual volume increase there was around about 9%. When we look at the number of new stores, they added 21 stores to an existing portfolio of what was about 110 stores, taking them to 129 stores in total. So that's a big expansion. The actual stock days improved quite nicely. That's a relative measure of how many days stock do they carry. And yet the inventory expanded from 3.2 billion rand to 3.9. So these are big numbers. And what this company has obviously been doing is buying in its growth. So market expectation on earnings for the full year ahead was 50%. We see 6% at interims, and obviously a question mark comes in. But it's really a function that growing this fast can be very, very expensive, and you write a lot of checks out. So hence a hiatus in the share price.
And if you were to compare it with Clicks, when you're putting your money there in the in the retail cosmetic industry, where would you put your money, in Clicks or in Dischem?
At these price levels, I would take Dischem over Clicks, but I think they're both quite expensive.
All right. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, as always, Warwick. That was Warwick Lucas, Chief Investment Officer at Galileo Capital. After a short break, Francis with more business news for you.